Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 73rd episode this week after another little hiatus, where we'll be breaking down and recapping Tom Brady's Hall of Fame induction last night, the Patriots draft. Even though it has been a little bit, this is our first time back since the draft, so we're gonna just do a brief recap of what our thoughts were, what our takeaways are, and then some expectations of the upcoming season, training camp, and mini camp. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up to the minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at Pats300levelpod.com. So it's been a little bit, Kevin. I know I've been on fellow podcast a couple weeks ago, Foxborough Fellas. So this is the first time you and I are both on together since the draft, and then first time we're back on our official podcast. So I think just to start, we'll start with the Brady night first, just since that was last night. I wasn't able to go since I'm on the West Coast right now. I wasn't able to get a flight back, but you went last night. What was your thoughts being in the stadium last night, being there in person, just the overall takeaway from it?
I think it was a great night, and I guess there's a couple things. I think one, I think the especially the end of it really kind of capped off the night. It was perfect weather, perfect temperature, sunny, wasn't too hot, wasn't raining or anything like that, it wasn't cold. Um, and I thought it was a really good night, especially the end. I would say I think a little bit towards the middle, it got a little dull, a little dry. Um, Part of it is I think that they were trying to um, draw it out so that way you can justify having people spend money spending 2.5 hours there, and you can't just say like, oh, we're gonna do this big event and like do all the good stuff and it'll be done like in an hour, and you waste like your whole day getting there and getting everything ready and buying all that stuff there just for like an hour. So I get them drawing it out. I would have probably preferred them doing a little bit more of like the musical acts, rather than some of the kind of teammate discussions, because some of that got redundant, I feel like.
Yeah.
And there are some people speaking that I thought like no one really wanted to really cared about hearing from. But yeah, I think it was a really good night. And again, my two favorite parts of the night were Bill and Tom, and that's probably no surprise for anyone. But going into this, we were saying how we thought that Bill was going to get a huge reaction going into it, just because fans aren't stupid. They know kind of what he was for his organization, what he did, and kind of that he was getting run through the mud by Robert. I think maybe we might talk about that more towards the end of the podcast. But it was, I think, his ovation that he got, and I said this to you earlier in the day, was everything I had expected and more. To be it, I watched it afterwards to see kind of how what it looked like on TV. Could you really tell how it was there? And I don't think the video did it justice for how
Oh, wow.
intense that was for it had to be over 4 minutes. I know the clip that the Patriots posted was I think 2 minutes and 48 seconds, but it went on even longer.
Yeah.
It was about 4 minutes long, and it was deafening, and you could really feel the energy and feel kind of what Bill was taking that in basically, where I and he kind of saw this going into the night, from Julian's podcast and from hearing all the stories that none of this would have been possible without what Bill had laid the foundation for and built this team and set those core values. Uh, None of this night would have ever happened without for him. And to see everything that he built kind of come into this one night, I thought it was incredible. Just the ovation that he got, and it just gives me chills still thinking about it. And then
Wow.
I think Tom did a really good job with his speech, kind of emphasizing what Bill taught with do your job. It's the team first and not I. And he had a lot of different kind of lessons out there. And there's a couple of different TikToks that are going viral right now of there's like a 2 minute spot in the speech, and then there's another like 30-second spot. And we want to check those out. We've retweeted them. But just basically kind of why he believes football is a great sport for people to play. Just because it is hard and it teaches you a lot of life lessons that you otherwise won't get. And basically about putting team ahead of me, and it's we instead of I. I just thought he had a fantastic speech to really
Yeah.
end the night. Those were obviously my two favorite things. The
Yeah.
Moss thing was really cool too. I don't get like of all people, I would say if I had to rank the ovations, Bill was actually the longest and the loudest. Um, Mostly, I think mostly because I think when Tom was first introduced, there are people still kind of going into the stadium. So you didn't get that long, loud ovation, and he was there throughout the night. So you saw him the whole time. So it didn't really get as loud and long. I think Bill's was actually the longest and the loudest. Then Tom's, and then Randy Moss is number three, which if
Yeah.
you had to if I had to bet my house on who after Bill and Tom, who would be the loudest ovation,
I'd say
I
probably
would
Julian,
I would
maybe
have never
Vinatieri if
guessed.
yeah.
Yeah, I would have never guessed him. Not to say Moss isn't great or anything. Like I really liked him when he was here. He quit on the team at the end, but you're really cheering for him at those beginning years. So '07, '08.
Yeah.
But that was really cool.
Mhm.
Whenever you see a grown man cry, it gets you a little bit. So
Yeah.
um
No, I think that's interesting to hear that even the video didn't do it justice because when I was watching it live on the stream, it seemed like it was just an incredible ovation that he
mhm,
got. You could tell it was loud. You could tell how how much the fans really cared about him, and you could see him just taking it in. And I was actually interested. We talked about this before, like after Bill was fired or mutually parted ways.
mhm,
Would he be at the ceremony? Would Kraft allow him to be there? Would he want to be there after everything the organization did? I think we both assumed he would want to be there just to be there for Tom.
mhm.
And then I don't know if I told you this or not, but I was wondering, since it's on the stream and I'm watching on the stream, is the stream going to do like the reverse of pumping in crowd noise so it doesn't seem as loud as it is? I mean, I don't think it did, obviously, because you
No.
could tell how it
And then the
was,
other
but
thing too is that you can even tell too where the problem with a lot of like the technology that we have now is that it doesn't encompass that crowd noise because it's background noise. It
yeah.
focuses on really what the microphone is at. So
Mhm.
like you even look at the videos if you watch like a Taylor Swift like TikTok or something like that
Yeah.
of like a concert, you never actually hear that crowd noise as much. Especially like I one of the first videos I went to look at afterwards is like, oh, I wonder what Portnoy's looks like when he was saying how like the crowd loves Bill, and you can't really hear the crowd in his because it's focusing more on what's closer to him rather than the
Mhm.
actual surrounding noise. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's interesting.
mhm,
Um, I was just gonna say something about it, but I just completely forgot. Oh, I remember. So I agree. I thought it was a little long, a little drawn out in the middle. Just as you said, a lot of the players were just pretty much repeating the same thing. The one thing I kind of wish was I wish there were more coaches
mhm,
talking because all the players pretty much said the same thing. Yes, you saw the different positional groups, you saw defense, you saw offensive
mhm,
linemen, running backs, receivers, etc. But the only coaches that really talked was McDaniels for less than a minute and then
mhm,
Bill's speech. But it would have been nice to hear from Charlie Weiss,
mhm,
who was there from the beginning,
mhm,
maybe Bill O'Brien or Ernie probably want to do a speech, but just
mhm.
like some of those coaches that were in the room with him saw all the preparation he was doing, all the film study behind the scenes. The players saw it in practice, but the coaches saw it in the classroom.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I was actually kind of hoping that we would see Ernie because just and again I think we haven't been on since the Ernie pod dropped
Yeah, I don't think we have
with
with
Jules.
Jules.
But if you haven't listened, you have to give it a listen. It's probably one of my
Oh,
favorite
it's
podcasts
incredible.
I've ever listened to. Much better than
Yeah.
ours.
Honestly, the guests that Jules has been getting
Mhm,
lately, the past maybe 5, 6 episodes, just as a Patriot fan, I think especially since Bill is gone, it just hits closer to home and makes
mhm,
you value it more because we'll talk about this later. We talked about it a little bit before, but the do your job mantra is starting to go out the door with all the changes that they're doing. So like hearing people that were in it from the beginning, where the Ty Law episode, Matt Light, Drew Bledsoe, even though the Matt Light and Drew Bledsoe didn't really focus too much on that, but like the Ty Law one did, the Ernie Adams one was incredible,
mhm,
Matt Slater. So all of those have just been, if you're a Patriots fan, if you
Hmm.
haven't listened to it yet, you must listen
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. Like, so I was hoping here, like, we heard a lot of stories on the Jules episode, but I'm sure he's got even more stories. So I thought that Ernie would have been a really good guy to listen to,
Yeah.
and he'd be giving you a different perspective. Like one thing too with Bill, where I don't think he's said in the past, because I remember him saying it, but no one ever really talks about it, and he mentioned that no one really. One of the greatest things about Tom is that he doesn't put you in a bad play,
Yeah.
and just explaining that more in depth about what that really meant and how that impacted the team is just
Yeah.
something that was, I think, so much better, because it was just something different that we were getting from Bill versus what like everyone was saying,
Yeah.
um,
And
in the
that's a good
player
point,
the
and that's
aspect.
something that a lot of fans don't really think about. And I honestly, the past couple of years, haven't really thought about it much either. But with someone that's that cerebral, that studies so much, he changes the play at the line of scrimmage so often, either protection, audibles, things like that, just based on knowing what the defense is showing ahead of them to prevent those instances. I still remember Sammy Morris when he was one of the years he was running back. He didn't have a negative rush all year. He wasn't a Pro Bowl running back at all, but that's just because the offense, in part due to just the offensive play calling, but also Brady at the line changing the play, put them in a position where he never ran negatively. Always at least got to the line of scrimmage or more. And that's just a small instance that I think Bill is trying to hone in on, that eliminating mistakes before a play even happens, even if it's a mistake by a coach or not even a mistake, but
Hmm.
just a wrong play compared to a defense that's being lined up against once
Hmm.
you're actually out of the huddle is just, I think that's probably the most underrated part of Tom Brady.
Yep. Um, yeah. Other than that, I think we kind of hit on a lot of it. About what was said that last night. I think it was just a fantastic night. I can't wait for. Eventually, I'm assuming they're going to do something similar for Bill. I can only
Well, I don't
imagine.
know. I honestly don't know.
I, I
I hope
think
so.
I think they're going to do it as much as, and we
The
haven't been
the
on
reason
since
the reason
that.
why I say I don't know is I don't know if Bill would want that.
I think he would do it if asked. So that's like one thing with Bill. If he's asked to do something, he usually will do something.
Yeah.
Um, like even he went out there because he knows what his legacy means, and he's a big like kind of NFL historian. Um, for him just going out there and doing that press conference with Robert, knowing that it wasn't a mutual decision, and maybe at some point it was where he was like, I can't work for this guy anymore.
Yeah.
But um, I think he would do it knowing what it would mean to everyone else to have. It's not as much for him, it's really for everyone else to kind of
I
enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's
Uh,
actually fair now that you mention it when you put it in that
mhm,
perspective, because I think he might take it as a way to thank all his coaches
mhm,
and his players, similar to his autobiography,
mhm,
which probably the greatest book I've ever read, The Education of a Coach by David Halberstam, which I have
mhm,
somewhere on the bookshelf over here. And if you guys haven't read it, highly recommend it. It was written in like 2006, 2007, so after the first three Super Bowls, but it hasn't included the last 15 years or 20 years. But it's still, from reading it, that you see pretty much into the mind of Bill. But part of the reason why he agreed to do the book was it's not solely about him, it's about how he got to who he is based on his dad.
mhm,
So it's kind of pretty much thanking his dad for everything that he's learned, as well as Ernie Adams. So you get it, see into the light, into the
mhm,
mind of Ernie Adams and into Steve Belichick while
mhm.
describing Bill. So
Yeah.
that's the reason why he agreed to that book. So I could see him doing a night like that
Mhm.
if it's for him being able to thank all his coaches and players.
Yeah. Um, and then other than that, there's a couple things because we talked a lot about Bill and a little bit about Tom. One,
Yeah.
one I thought Drew actually was really, he's been actually really good in this kind of little circuit that he's been doing lately.
Yeah.
And I thought he had one good line. Um, well, he had a few good lines, but the one that stood out the most, that I remember the most, was that he was like, "There's one job that Tom has never that did not do well, and that was being a backup quarterback." So um, I thought he was really good. I
Yep.
enjoyed him. Edelman was good, as you would expect. Um, Yeah, I just wish we got still a little bit more of the kind of the coaching aspect because everyone pretty much said the same stuff.
Yeah.
I thought Matt Castle talked a little bit too much for
Mm.
what he was to the team, but
Yeah.
um,
And
yeah.
then I think one thing too that just I don't know if you noticed it or not, but one thing that kind of struck me during Tom's speech was it was either his speech or during the interviews how he was saying that the early year, I think it was during the interviews with the players, the early years it wasn't on him. I think it was when he was talking with Peyton Manning. It was on the defense because the defense is
Hmm.
what led them to where they are, where he was not taking the credit for those early years where
Hmm.
I know some fans, some in the media say that it was all Brady for the success,
Hmm.
or in the early years, Brady had nothing to do with it. Where, yes, he wasn't the quarterback he is now, or was.
Hmm.
I still think now he'd be one of the top three quarterbacks in the NFL. But besides the point, he wasn't the best quarterback in the league, but in clutch situations, he's the reason why they won all those Super Bowls. Him in the snow against Oakland, him in the Super Bowl versus the Rams, him with the comebacks versus Carolina. So him to defer and deflect the credit in those Super Bowls was something he didn't have to do on
Hmm.
his night, but just kind of shows his selflessness.
Yep. And I think another thing that Bill brought up that was really good about Tom was that he made everyone else better too. So
Yep.
not just what he was, how well he performed in the game, but by how well he performed in practice made everyone else better. Because you're
Yep.
practicing against the best quarterback around, so it makes the defense better. It makes the coaches better because they have to prepare more against him, and that you never want to be out prepared against him. So
Yeah.
I thought
And
that was a really good remark.
even how like Bill was saying, there were times where in training camp he would talk with the coaches wondering, is their defense really bad because they would just be getting shredded
Hmm.
all practice and wondering, are we actually not as good as we thought we were going to be? But it's just because they're going up against the greatest of all
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and now you see the opposite the last couple of years where the defense has been dominating in practice, and well, you
Yeah.
realize that the defense is the better unit, and it's not a surprise that the offense is actually stifling. Um, so with that said, I think we kind of talked all that we were going to really say about the Brady night.
Just one random question. Did it
Yeah.
seem like people were, since the game or since the ceremony was essentially going on the same time as the Celtics, as someone that was streaming it, it was nice because I could listen and watch it while
Mhm.
having the Celtics in the background until it ended. Did it seem like a lot of people were leaving early? Again, it might not have been because of the Celtics, but it might have also been people like Portnoy where you saw the beginning part, you saw the entrance, but then they left before Bill or Brady because they wanted to see the Celtics.
No, if anything, it was like more the most packed it was like starting from 8 o'clock throughout till the end.
Okay.
And there wasn't really there was a couple like murmurs here and there, like, oh, Celtics are up, but it didn't seem like many people were disengaged from it. I think towards the middle, people like zoning off, like
Yeah.
because it was getting a little boring. But
Hmm.
I think everyone was especially honed in
Probably
with
also helped
the
too that the Celtics were up 2-0, so if they did lose this game, it
yeah.
wasn't clinching game, but they still were in control of the series. But
Yeah.
just wanted to know.
Yeah, no, I think everyone was kind of really laser focused on it. The most from when Bill started to then Tom in there. So I think those that last what was it maybe 40 minutes or so because I think
Yeah.
the Bills was like 20 something minutes and Tom's was 20. Yeah. So the last like almost hour I think made the whole night. That was
Yeah.
everything.
One more thing too that I haven't brought up, I haven't talked to you yet about, but I was just wondering. I was very disappointed with Bill Burr's. I love Bill Burr. I didn't find him funny last night.
Yeah, I think that's a tough spot for him to be in. I
Yeah,
think he's kind of forcing a lot of things and then
because
also
I thought
trying
he
to
would have
keep
been
it
great for
like
the roast, and I was surprised he wasn't in the roast. And I'm assuming
Mhm.
because he was in doing this, but I was just kind of disappointed with him.
Yeah, it seemed like it was more stuff that was like prepared for him than
Okay,
stuff that like there was this the screen stuff with the different haircuts. It doesn't seem
yeah,
like I think that was more like we want you to do this, make it funny somehow.
yeah,
And so I think a lot of it was like just like kind of forced on him. And
that's
wasn't
fair.
really all of his material. and it's a weird spot to be in that to try and make it kind of like because anyone that's watched Bill Burr knows he's not really family friendly. So to
Yeah,
try and make it
that's
where
true.
they mentioned a few times that they were told to make everything family friendly because there's a bunch of kids there. So, um, yeah, I think that he was kind of maybe handcuffed a little bit with
Okay.
that. There's a couple of jokes here and there he threw in that were a little
Yeah.
funny. So like the Hernandez and some other things, but um, I'm surprised that he went there because
Yeah.
anyway, other than that, anything else you wanted to ask about the Brady
No,
night before we move on to the
I thought it was
draft?
a great event. Wish I could have been there in person, but I guess the two other things which we didn't talk about yet is how they're retiring his number, which is not surprising at all,
Hmm.
and there's going to be the statue, which again, not surprising at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I think the one thing with the statue I'm still disappointed in. I know it's not
They were never going to
realistic.
do it, Kevin.
And it makes the most sense because if I had a guess where it would have ever gone, being in that little like in that little concourse area they made makes the most sense.
Yeah.
They should put a ginormous statue on the lighthouse. Just that that's what they should be doing. Everyone will be able to see it during the game. And then what they should do, but they're also probably not going to do because there's other numbers retired. If he was the only number retired, I would have wanted to see it hanging from the lighthouse. So underneath, yeah, if you have, not everyone's watching us on YouTube, but like there's the glass that people kind of blocks you from falling off the thing when you're walking. But underneath there's the concrete and it's flat and it would actually hold the number pretty well.
Yeah.
But
That's one thing that I've been surprised about, and I wonder if they're going to change it now since Brady's is actually retired, but I'm surprised they don't have the retired numbers anywhere in the stadium. And this is Brady's now the eighth, I think, seventh or eighth. So
mhm,
I still think they should have it somewhere. And now that Brady says they might do it to help not
yeah.
remember Brady, he's still alive and still doing well, but to honor his play with the Patriots.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they might do that because that to try and have it up. Because even before this, I actually had no idea if they actually had any numbers officially retired because they never really talk about it. So,
I knew they did. I always forget who. I just remember in the
mm,
2001 season, which was the Patriots' first Super Bowl year. I remember they retired Bruce Armstrong's jersey.
mm,
Um, so I knew that. I assumed Hannah was and Gino Capiletti.
yeah,
I knew Mike Haynes was, but I forgot all seven or eight of them.
yeah. One other thing before we move on to the draft, and then we'll kind of try and bang out the draft a little quick because I think a lot of you have already seen some recaps on it and you saw
And
Eric's
then yeah,
podcast with the Foxborough
Foxborough fellas.
fellows. Um, but another thing that was actually kind of cool for last night was that you could there was this fenced area where you could actually go up and see everyone coming into the stadium. So all of like the special guests and all that sort of stuff. And there was really no fans over there. There was only a few. So you can get right up to the fence. See, I was probably 10 feet from Tom Brady at one point. So probably the closest I'll ever get to him ever again in my life, ever since training camp like 20 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Um,
Still remember what training camp one year he would go one person, then every like 20.
Oh
So
yeah,
like
so
one
we
person
would get to the
20,
part where like, you're like, oh, I might get an autograph, and you'd skip the
he
next
did
like,
it literally to the person to my right.
yeah,
So disappointed.
yeah. But anyway, so I get to you get to be right up close. So I get to
Yeah.
see Tom. He gave actually a wave when I yelled at his name. Josh did the same thing. Nick Casero did too. Um, Tom Brady Senior did as well. I think I forgot to tell you
Ernie?
that he was one of them. I didn't yell at Ernie. I didn't want to. He was with his wife, and I don't know. Old people kind of like I don't want to disrupt them too much, but he was looking just good as ever. He had the same shoes on that he had from the Jules podcast, and a nice blazer on. Um, he was doing one last night.
Nice.
But the one kind of funny thing I don't think I sent in the group text last night. Jack Brady is a unit. That kid
Yeah.
is like I think he's taller than the Tom.
Well,
Um,
Tom said in the speech last night that he is the same height as him.
hmm.
So it's at least
And he's
6'4" and
only
he's
16,
16.
so he's definitely going to be taller than him by the time he gets to be 18. Which is also surprising too, because I didn't think that Bridget Monahan was that tall.
I don't
But
remember.
I don't know enough about her. So anyway, let's get into the draft real quick. We'll
Yep.
kind of talk about I think really the top Top two would be the most that we'll kind of focus on in depth, and then we'll kind of hit some random things there. So number one, when we were doing the preview, what we had expected, what would happen, did happen. It's not really any surprise. Drake May.
And I think you and I, it's both something, but we agreed on of what we
Mhm.
wanted to as fans, and then also just our thoughts of what would be best. I was, again, for a couple months, there were some questions on would the Commanders take Drake May, or would they go with Jaden Daniels? And then depending on that, if someone offers as Jerod Mayo would say, if someone offers a bag,
Yeah.
would the Patriots take it? And then, according to the trade reports, none of them were anywhere close
Hmm.
to something that would make the Patriots interested. So I'm glad they went with Drake May. I think he's the best option and the best chance for the Patriots to move forward and have success in the near future. I still think I know he's been having there's been great reports of him out of training camp. I still think he needs to sit this first year or
Hmm.
majority of the year. If it's the last 2 to 4 games, then okay, maybe get his feet wet. But before that, I don't want to see him on the field. Even if I will get to it in a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. As much as there is wrong with Drake May, so his footwork, his mechanics, his ability to read the defense, so all fundamental things that you need to do well to succeed in the NFL. He's got those raw skills that you can't teach. So he's got
Yeah,
height, he's got size, he's got the arm strength, and I would I would have to think, I don't know too much about his mental kind of fortitude, but he played behind a bad offensive line at UNC last year, and really had no one to throw to either until halfway through the year,
yeah,
um, and handled it fine. He didn't crumble like a cookie like
Mac.
Mac Jones. So I think that's just another thing that we have to kind of keep in mind when evaluating quarterbacks is that have they been through adversity? And there's actually a bunch of quarterbacks this year that have. So you could say Jane Daniels has. You could say that Drake May
Penix.
has, and Penix coming back from two blown out knees, two blown out shoulders,
Even Bo
and
Nix too.
mhm,
His situation at Auburn, then going to Oregon.
yeah. So and then you have the other two, Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy, who haven't really faced as much adversity. You could maybe say Caleb that he had no defense, he had to do it all on his own, but then he had those events where he kind of cried on the sideline. So and then JJ really had to do nothing
Yeah,
at Michigan and what that's going to look like. So I think having that mental fortitude is definitely going to help. Yeah, we know that the Patriots have no left tackle right now.
yeah,
We'll get into that in a little bit. And so, judging off of what the offensive line looks like, at least it's something that he's used to playing at UNC.
yeah,
Again, I agree with you too. I don't want him starting. I don't care how much they say that they've fixed him. He needs that ingrained into him.
yeah.
I don't think
It needs to be muscle
that
memory.
it has to be muscle memory. I don't think you could have muscle memory from just training camp and mini camp. It has to be more than that. And maybe he's a
Yeah,
guy that can learn them is better learning on the fly, but for technique and fundamentals, that I don't think that's something you learn on the fly. That's not something where he's trying to learn how to read. It's different between learning a defense and figuring out how to throw and make the right throws and
and I
reads and
think
all that
learning
sort
a
of stuff.
defense is something that he needs to learn too.
Yeah.
No, no, discredit to him at all. It's just going from the college game, especially at the lower D1A
Hmm.
level. It's not like he was in the SEC facing that competition every
Yeah.
single week. It was still D1, but it wasn't against the top teams in the country, top defenses. But going from that level against bad teams
Hmm.
to the NFL is a big jump too. So that's
Yeah.
part of the reason why I want to see him just sit the whole year. His fundamentals, as you
Hmm.
said, and then I'll just get into it now, and then we'll talk about it when we're talking through the rest of the picks. But the offensive line is such a crapshoot right now.
Hmm.
They don't have a left tackle on the team. They don't really have a left guard right now, just because of Cole Strange. He's might not play this year. If he is, he's coming in late in the season.
Hmm.
Uh, your projected left tackle is either someone that has only played right tackle in the NFL, Okafor. He was a left tackle in college, but only right tackle in
Hmm.
the NFL. or Wallace, who is only a right tackle in college. Granted, that's probably because he had Olu, one of the top left tackles in
Hmm.
the country, on his team, but again, still hasn't played left tackle. And then for guards, you have I'm blanking on his name, the guy from Tampa Bay, who's like a spot starter,
Hmm.
or you have Robinson, who's a right guard, or you have City Sao, who was, I believe he was left guard in college, but he was great this past year. But again, right guard for the Patriots. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of mismatching pieces that you're trying to work through on the offensive line. And then Elliot Wolf, after the draft, was saying that we've learned from the Mac Jones experience and we don't want to put our quarterback through that. Yes, Mac Jones wide receivers weren't great. The biggest issue that led to his demise, in my opinion, was a shoddy offensive line
Hmm.
because he kept getting pressure. The running game couldn't get going just because the offensive line wasn't blocking. And then because of that, the teams knew they were going to be passing. And then when they were passing, he didn't have time to throw because the offensive line didn't give him time. So if that's the same situation, which with all this uncertainty on the offensive line, maybe the new left tackles figure it out. Maybe the left guard and right guard figure it out too. But for me right now, all this uncertainty, I don't want him starting. And then
Hmm.
if you start him to begin the year, and he starts getting broken like Zach Wilson or a lot of rookie quarterbacks do,
Hmm.
how
You
detrimental you
can't
can't
bench him.
really, yeah, you can't bench him. So
And that was something too that Bill had mentioned on the McAfee show. And I don't know if he mentioned this on the Fox Bill, I can't remember. But the one thing about deciding when to start a quarterback, and he mentioned this too, is that you have to know in your gut that he is completely ready because you cannot pull back.
yeah,
And he said that like, you cannot pull back once you put him in there, or else that will do more harm than the rest of the onslaught that they're going to get. So,
hell, look at
um,
the Jets
yeah, it
pretty
happens
much.
with the Jets pretty much all the time. Every quarterback they've had.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing too is it might be unfair to the coaching staff because all of them are new,
mhm,
but I don't have faith in them to make that decision that he's ready at this point. We talked about this on a previous episode, and I maybe when we get to preseason we'll see, but it's also different in practice going up against defenses than in game situations. In
mhm,
practice, the quarterback knows he's not going to get hit. So he might actually still have good fundamental when he's facing pressure. In a game situation where he has the potential to get sacked or blindside hit,
mhm,
that's when he's going to go back to what that muscle memory is. Where
mhm.
if it's not ingrained in him to have that good fundamentals, he's going back to what Mac Jones was doing last year. So that's the other thing too, where Drake May, much more talented than Jacoby Brissett. No offense to Jacoby Brissett. So in drills and practices, he's going to be making throws that Jacoby Brissett cannot.
Mhm.
So if the coaches think he's ready from those practices and not actual game situations, that's where they're going to get into false hope, thinking he's ready, but he's not.
Yep. And then,
Essentially, what happened to Justin Fields his rookie year, where Andy Dalton isn't great, but again, Justin Fields was so talented that he stood out in practices, but he
mhm,
just wasn't ready.
mhm. And that's what I'm worried about with everyone kind of reporting how well Drake May looks, is that I
Yeah.
think it's going to give a false sense of security. And like you said, I don't trust the coaching staff from what we know about them already. I actually kind of trust Van Pelt.
Yeah.
I feel like he brings that kind of sense of kind of seniority and that he's been around the block, and he
Yeah.
seems like of all the kind of new coaches around, I actually have probably more faith in him than some of the other ones.
I do
Um,
too. And when we talked about the coaching staff, he's the one that I actually liked his hire and I do
mhm,
trust him. The thing is, as Elliot Wolf said on one of the NFL network shows, that it's going to be a collaborative process deciding who the quarterback is. You guys know our thoughts on Jerod Mayo. We're not high on him, but this should 100% be Jerod Mayo's decision.
mhm,
Yes, you should be getting input from coaches and maybe a little bit from front office, but it should be coach's decision. It should be his decision.
mhm,
That's why if it was entirely Van Pelt's decision, I would be a little more comfortable with this whole collaborative process and then potentially a meddling owner.
mhm.
I don't have faith they're going to be making the right decision.
Yep, and I agree too. I think that Kraft is going to get in the air where he says that he's metal and all this other stuff, but he nudges, and people know what their owner actually wants. So
And a
he
lot
may
of the
say,
reports coming out too are saying, contrary to what Kraft says publicly, a lot of
yeah,
reports from insiders are saying that the ownership group is having some input or decisions
mhm.
on impact on decisions.
Yeah. So based off of that, and I don't think that Jerod Mayo has a backbone to stand up to him. He's basically, I feel like a puppet kind of coach right now. I am afraid that they're gonna start May and it could ruin him. And
Yeah.
again, it could. Maybe he still might be fine. But
Yeah.
looking at him in college, he makes the same mistakes that Mac Jones makes. He got away with it because he was facing lesser talent on defense and because he's got a better arm. So there's just some throws that he can make off balance and throw off his back foot and still complete it, and doesn't look like that Indianapolis game in London in Germany where it falls like 10 yards too short and right in the hands of a
Yeah.
receiver. He's not going to make that throw just because his arm is better.
Yeah.
But he's going to be throwing up there still. And you look at Josh Allen, you look at all the mistakes that he makes. Um, that's just because he breaks down and has issues, and he's gotten
Yeah.
better over the years, but he still fundamentally sometimes has those mistakes. Um, and we want to limit those. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
we'll
then
say.
another thing too, he could be like CJ Stroud, who started out of the gate and had a great season.
Mhm,
Big difference between the Patriots and CJ Stroud is CJ Stroud had a potential Hall of Fame left tackle. He
mhm,
has an excellent offensive line. He has great wide receivers.
mhm,
As we just said, Patriots left tackle is such a question mark. Offensive line is such a question mark. And they quote unquote helped their wide receivers, but they
mhm,
didn't completely revamp the room with wide receiver ones. In my opinion, there's still not a wide receiver one, maybe not even a
mhm.
wide receiver two on the team for this year.
Yep. And I think the big thing that we had mentioned before is that based off of what they've done, this needs to be not how do we play in 2024. This needs to be how are we successful in 2025.
Yep.
Everything that their decisions should be for this year should be how do we make the playoffs in 2025 and how do we be competitive in the playoffs, not just make the playoffs. They how can we compete? So
Yep.
how can we win at least one game in the playoffs in 2025? That should be what this entire season is about. I don't think they're going to win many games. I think they're going to maybe win more than last year just because it was such a crapshoot for how they lost those games where you if they replayed all of those games last year, they wouldn't have lost as many. It just
Yep.
the amount of times that things didn't go their way, the odds. You look at the Raiders a couple years ago, and there's some stat out there. I can't remember what it is, but it basically kind of shows how winnable a game is and
Yep.
what could happen in reverse kind of situations. And the Raiders a couple years ago, they won all those close games. They made the playoffs,
And
and
then
they just did the
they lost a
next year.
playoff game that was close. And
Yeah,
then the next year they sucked.
and then the next year, they didn't win those games. They didn't make that one play that they needed to do, and it just happens. So,
Yeah.
I think obviously they're gonna win more. They have a better
I don't know
quarterback play.
about obviously. They have a really tough
They
schedule.
have a really tough schedule, but they finished so poorly last year.
Yeah.
It's very hard to lose that many games.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I agree. And I mentioned this before. I'll just briefly talk about this because and then we'll move on to the next one. But I think that they can definitely win more games, maybe 6 to 7.
mhm,
But I think they're also going to get blown out in more games where,
mhm,
or they're not going to be as close where they lost what 13 games last year,
mhm,
but they were within one score with 5 minutes to go in 15 of those 17 games.
mhm.
I don't think that's going to be the case this year. But as you said, if you're building for 2025, it might actually be beneficial if you win 5 to 7 games, you end up with a top 10 pick, go into next offseason with 150 million in cap
Mhm.
space and a high pick, and then that's when you go all in.
Yep. All right. So we talked a little about May. Next one, Jalen Polk. I don't think this was any sort of flashy pick. I think this is the
Yeah.
safe um, Toyota Camry or Toyota Corolla kind of pick out of there where you know what you're getting. You
Yep.
have a very high floor, but maybe lowish ceiling kind of
Yep.
player.
I agree.
Where you know you're going to get a dependable wide receiver. I think the best comp out there, I think, is really Jacoby Myers. comp where you get
Yep.
a dependable wide receiver. He's not fast. He catches the ball. He knows where he needs to be, and you need those guys. Do you need those guys as a round 2 pick?
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but
I think it depends on
their
who's
later pick.
available where they were picking.
Yeah, and there were reports that they were heavily trying to get the receiver that Kansas City ended up trading up with the Bills to get, and the Bills
Yeah,
just wouldn't trade with
there
the
were reports
Patriots.
they were trying to get Worthy. There were reports they were trying to get Xavier Leggett, who I really
Hmm.
wanted,
Yeah,
partially just because
I
his
wanted him
accent is
just because
awesome.
Bill
But
wanted him
yeah,
drastically. Yeah, like Bill was very high in Leggett. Um,
and they also want reports that they also want Coleman from
mhm,
FSU.
which I did not want. I did
Yeah, I
not
didn't
want
either.
anything to do with him. I wanted either Leggett or I wanted the guy that Kansas City ended up getting, the fastest guy in the draft. Where I
Yeah,
know we got burnt with that the last time, but if Kansas City's looking for a guy, I'm gonna try and get whoever they're getting. So,
yeah, yeah. Like you said, I think he's can be a solid number
mhm,
two wide receiver. I don't know if he'll ever be a number one, but we'll see. I mean, they definitely need a wide receiver too because right now they don't have it. The
mhm,
only concern is he was wide receiver two in college, and now he's drafted to potentially be wide receiver one on an NFL team.
mhm,
So if he's facing better defenses, more double teams potentially, it depends on if
mhm,
you think Kendrick Bourne is going to face number one coverage or Pop Douglas,
mhm,
etc. But being that drafted that high, almost a first round pick, you're essentially drafted to be a wide receiver one. So how will that
mhm.
affect his production?
Yeah. All right. Now going on Caden Wallace, we talked a little bit. Pretty good right tackle.
Yeah,
Never
big guy.
played, never played left tackle.
Yeah,
Supposedly practiced left tackle in practice all the time, according to the coaching staff at Penn State. But they're really hoping that they can get one of these guys that hasn't played left tackle in the NFL to play left tackle. And
yeah,
it's a pretty big gamble. And
yeah,
maybe that they think that maybe Calvin Anderson's a dark horse, that because he had all those issues last year. But some of the reports out there are he came into camp very lean, probably because of the heart issue, where I don't know if he could put on enough weight.
Calvin Anderson.
Yeah,
That or almost dying with malaria.
yeah. So by the two of them, I don't know if he's gonna be healthy enough this year to
Yeah.
actually even compete, just from a weight size.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I know that had more expectations for him last year, but um, again, I like this player. I also kind of feel like they reached for him where there was the run on tackles, and they're like, we need to get one now because there's
Yeah.
none left, and they're like, well, we'll draft him and hope they could play left tackle. I was hoping for the Hawaiian guy that they were going to trade up for, that they could have
Yeah.
traded up for, and he was there for the taking, and they didn't. But
Yeah. No, I agree, but I think it's still a potentially good pick. We never know with
yeah,
the picks, but he's a
oh yeah.
big guy, strong guy.
Mhm.
So we'll actually see how it pans out. But he has the potential.
Yeah. Next pick, Layden Robinson. At first, it was a head scratcher because they drafted all those guards last year. And we're
Yeah.
like, why do you need another guard? It makes more sense now knowing that Cole Strange is probably out for the year based on how they're talking. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like it was a good knee injury. They still haven't said what it was. So
Yeah.
I don't know what. Like usually an ACL, even towards the end of the year for a lineman, usually they could start by the beginning of the year. So
Yeah.
he had to have really messed up his knee. I don't know
Yeah. It
what
must
he
have
did
either
with it.
been a really bad injury or just
Mhm.
complications with surgery.
Yeah. So next one, this one excited me more. And he could be the number one wide receiver you're looking
Yep.
for in the future. With Javon Baker, wide receiver, fourth round pick from UCF. Really flashy. He's that boundary wide receiver that you're looking for. He's fast. He kind of makes all the catches. The biggest thing with him is that some of his
Don't
off
don't
fields,
don't, yeah, don't talk about Bedard stuff because he's
not the
bullshit.
Bedard stuff, but
Yeah,
there
I
were
know.
other stuff out there ahead
Yeah.
of time. Not There were some like off-field concerns with him.
Yeah.
I not to the extent where Bedard's trying to cancel the guy and say that there were some really bad things, just like he said
He's
there were
trying to
about
do the
Christian
same thing he did
Barmore.
with Barmore.
And I think as much as I think he's just trying to throw enough at the wall and see what sticks, and eventually
Yep.
he'll be right. So, um, Yeah, I think he fell a little bit because of that.
Yep.
There's some concerns with him.
Yeah,
I
my thoughts with Baker is I think he's can either be boom or bust. I think
mhm.
he can break out and be that number one wide receiver that you're hoping for, but I could also see him just not working out and being
Yeah,
out of off the team in a year.
yeah, probably a year or two. But I did enjoy his grab your popcorn and I can make people in
Yeah.
wheelchair stand. Not the most PC thing, but all right. Fifth round pick. They didn't have any result of a trade. I think it was to get this move back into the fourth. I think. I can't remember what it was now. Sixth round. Marcellus Dial, cornerback, South Carolina. He's actually projecting more of a free safety,
Yeah.
based off of kind of his size and speed. Um, again, they don't
It
really
always helps
have.
to have depth at the defensive back position.
Hmm.
We've talked about this after free agency, where the Patriots actually do have some depth,
Hmm.
but you can never have too much. I mean, they have Alex Austin, who's been played well at the end of last year,
Hmm.
has been doing well in camp. You have Marco Williams or Wilson, I always forget.
Wilson.
Wilson. You have Isaiah Bolden,
Hmm.
Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, Gonzo. So you have players, but it's always good to have that extra
Hmm.
person where he was a cornerback but might project to be a safety. He could take over that Miles Bryant role with Miles Bryant out.
Hmm.
So again, late round picks, you never know if they'll even make the team, but
Hmm.
worth the potential.
Yeah. Next one of my favorite selections on this team. Joe
I was
Milton.
hoping for him all draft. I
Yeah.
kept following the draft, seeing if he was taken, and
Hmm.
B, would the Patriots go after him. And I actually didn't. I was out, so I was on my phone and I was refreshing the draft
Hmm.
order, and I didn't believe it when I saw Joe
Hmm.
Milton by the Patriots at 190 something.
Hmm. 193. So Joe Milton, Tennessee quarterback. I think everyone saw the videos from both his pro day and from the combine. He's got a cannon of an arm. It's
Yeah.
an absolute cannon. He could throw 80 yards easily. He
But
can't. He's not
As
accurate.
Alex Barth famously says, if you ask him to throw it 80 yards, he'll throw it 80 yards. If you ask him to throw it 5 yards, he'll throw it 80 yards.
Yeah. So he's got an absolute rocket of an arm. I know I'm gonna get absolutely hurt by loving this guy. He's the next Rohan Davey, I think, where he's got
With a bigger arm.
a bigger arm than Rohan Davey. He'll probably be in like the USFL in like 4 years, but um, I'm really excited
I
just to see if he can
yeah.
develop, and if he can, is there somehow some way he's your next quarterback after May, or if you
Yeah.
have two quarterbacks, usually the saying is if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. I don't know. There's something about Joe. Like I'm hoping for
I
something.
think it's worth the risk just because it's sixth round, so at that
Hmm.
point it's all a crapshoot there anyway. But quarterback is a position where you need a guy, and he has the talent.
Hmm.
You see his arm strength, you see the throws he can make. He just needs some development. So again, a lot of times you can't teach accuracy. Like
Hmm.
Ryan Mallett, someone that had a cannon, never had accuracy. He
Hmm.
did start some games with Texans. He might have started one with the Ravens, but he's someone that realistically I'm kind of comparing him to just
Hmm.
because he had a cannon, not good accuracy. So he might be someone that maybe you do with the right coaching, with the right fundamentals, you can teach that where he can get his accuracy
Hmm.
under control. I don't have high expectations that he will, but it's something that you're drafting him knowing that he's so raw.
Hmm.
You're going to develop him where he'll probably need 3 years. So just have him on the side, just doing those things, and maybe you get something. If not, you let him go. But
Hmm. Yep.
the one thing I am worried with him, I talked to a couple people about it. I don't know if I talked with you or other people, is I'm worried that they're going to try and practice squad him.
Hmm.
And if they do, another team will just pick him up, just again,
Sign him
knowing
and
it's a,
stash him.
yeah, sign him, stash him, where he'll be your QB3 that doesn't suit up for every game,
Hmm.
but if there's an injury, he can come in as that QB3.
Hmm.
Just because a lot of times the Patriots don't carry three quarterbacks, and B, I wonder if they think that they can keep him on the practice squad. But one thing with Bill, that he always knew how the rest of the league would
Hmm.
value his players. So it was very, very rare if we ever cut a player on cut downs and have them signed by another team or
Hmm.
claimed off waivers, just because he knew who to covet, which were the right players to cut where he knew he
Hmm.
could get them and stash them on the practice squad, and which players, if he tried to do that, would be claimed by other teams.
Hmm.
I don't trust, even though Wolf was here before then, Groh was here before then, I don't trust Wolf/Groh and this coaching staff enough to have that wherewithal of knowing how other teams value your team.
Yep. And I think we saw it last year with Zappy, where he knew cutting him that
Yeah.
he'd be able to stash him in the practice squad and sign him, and he still was looking for other quarterbacks because he knew that he sucked. But
Yeah. Which
um,
is kind of insane too, where someone that started 2 years the year before as a rookie won
hmm,
both games and he still knew that everyone else knew he sucked.
yeah, and well, it was pretty easy to look at him and
Yeah.
know that they faced the one of the two worst defenses in the
And I
league.
don't think he would have been upset if he did get signed either.
Yeah, so then he wouldn't have to have him, so it would have
Yeah.
forced them to get someone else.
Yeah.
All right. Last one, Jaheim Bell, tight end, Florida State. He's more of kind of the pass catching tight end, not really known for blocking.
Yeah.
Seventh round pick. Who knows if he even makes the team? Not really something that.
Yeah, the thing with him is that a lot of people had him going much higher. You could tell he has a lot of talent.
Mhm,
Um, it depends on if he can put it together. He could definitely be the steal of the draft with how much talent he has.
mhm,
Some people kind of compare him to I'm not saying Aaron Hernandez's ability, but how Aaron Hernandez could line up in the running back position and take handoffs. He could do a lot more things. Or how Jonnu Smith, how they try to utilize
mhm.
Jonnu Smith, even though Jonnu Smith was a bust with the Patriots, how he could fit that role of the offense. So I know that's what they're hoping to get out of it. We'll see if he can translate that in the next level. But he can,
Mhm.
if he does, he can add an element to this offense.
Yep. All right. So that was all the draft picks. I know this is a pretty long podcast so far, so we'll just briefly kind of talk about our thoughts. We kind of did already, so we won't have to hit on it too long. And then we'll obviously get it right before training camp. We'll probably have another pod on the preview training
Yeah.
camp. But kind of thoughts already from what we've seen. I think the first one we talked about quarterback play, so we don't really have to hit on that. We talked about team expectations. We don't really have to hit on that. I know we've talked about Jerod, but I just want to kind of there's been some just more stuff over the last month or two,
Yeah.
where I just don't have faith in him. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many times that he's had to walk back whatever he said, and
Yeah.
it's fine one or
Or
two
just as the
times.
opposite the next time he talks, not even walking back.
Yeah,
Just
and I get it happening maybe once or maybe twice and learning from it. And the big thing that you have to that you care about really any employee, no matter what you work, so whatever your job is do you learn from your mistakes? And I don't think he does. I just don't know what's going on in his head because he's free talking off the top of his head. He's spitballing everything. He hasn't learned that he needs to slow down and think about what he's saying before he actually talks. And should I be saying this is another thing. Like the quarterback situation. Uh, I'm completely fine with him carrying four quarterbacks into camp because that's what's normally done by really every team because you need the arms in camp to have the throws. Number one, number two, it doesn't really matter. Um, but why are you telling people you're going to get down to three quarterbacks to begin with? Like, why? What does that benefit you by telling them that? It seems like he's talking way too much and doesn't know when to actually stop talking.
yeah.
And
Shortly after he was hired as a coach, he said, "We have a lot of money to spend.
Mhm,
We're going to burn some cash." And then
mhm,
they didn't. They spent
yeah.
money on their own free agents, but they didn't burn some cash. They didn't bring in new talent like he
Mhm.
said they were going to do. There is just had I was just going to say something. And I'm blanking of something else that he said that they're going to do, and I just can't remember.
But
But you
anyway,
can,
there's been a lot of
yeah.
scenarios where that's happened, and it just doesn't seem the amount it's happening. It and just the way he's talking about everything.
Oh, the
Uh,
one of the other ones was he was saying that uh maybe we'll trade the pick if we get a bag. And he was the one that said that specifically. If you get a bag, that's the way to build this offense or
mhm,
build your team is stockpile those picks.
mhm,
And then after the draft, he was saying, well, we did something that Bill would never want to do is we wanted to take the best player available. It doesn't do us any value if we don't take the best player available, if we
mhm,
just stash some picks, even though Gerard was saying before a month before
mhm.
that that's how you build a championship team.
Yeah. And like, how fucking dare you say that that's Bill would not have done this? We're completely different from Bill. You have no fucking clue what Bill would have done. Odds are he probably would have traded the pick and
But
probably
that
drafted JJ McCarthy. But
that would have been for a different reason, not to
mhm,
just stockpile picks. It's because
yeah.
that's who he viewed as that the best
Mhm,
player available and who he would have taken at that
yeah.
spot. And since he knows someone else would be people covet
Mhm,
players differently, he could trade back and still take that same player. So
yeah.
that's what he's doing. It's not to just stockpile picks to trade
Mhm,
back for the sake of trading back.
yeah.
It's because he knows who he wants and he's trading back and getting assets while still getting who he wants. Essentially what
Mhm,
Danny Ainge did with the Celtics.
mhm,
Danny Ainge knew Jason Tatum was the best player in the draft. He was going to pick him number one. He
mhm,
knew Philadelphia wanted Ben Simmons. He knew that the Lakers wanted Lonzo Ball. He
mhm,
traded back to three, knowing he could still take that same player. It wasn't trading back to stockpile picks. It's
mhm,
because he knew who he wanted.
mhm. Yeah, and you think from being there, this is like the other thing where I just don't think he has much going on up there, is that he's been with the team now for so many years as a player and as a coach. And if you just don't know that fundamental thing with Bill is what he's doing, like what did you actually learn from him? And the other thing is that I get you're trying to establish your own culture and you want like it to be your own thing, but kind of wiping away the do your job thing at first. I get that was a Bill thing. You're trying to be different than Bill, but you watch and listen, and to tie back into the Brady night, and then to tie back in to Mike Vrabel's night, or day, when he had the Hall of Fame ceremony last year. Um, it's ingrained in this whole team, in this whole philosophy, and what makes this whole team click. And the culture that was established was do your job, your specific job, and then focus on team over me and we, not me. It just, I feel like some of the things he's doing is just for the name of not being Bill. And the whole one of the things where Kraft wants him is that he's claimed that he was trained under the greatest head coach. Well, use it. You can't just throw away everything that Bill did over the last 20 years and say we need to be different. I get you need to be different. You need to be your own guy, and that's why a lot of the coaches have failed. But you need to learn something. You need to use what you've learned. It's not like what you've been through in your time as a player and time as a coach was a complete waste of time. You need to use what you learned.
Mike
And
Vrabel is and Brian Flores are the two perfect examples
mhm,
of that, where they learned. And some people might say Brian Flores isn't a good coach. I think he is. Granted, how he handled his offensive coaching staff is another story.
yeah.
But for the most part, they learned the good aspects from Bill that
Mhm,
they can still use and not try and be someone that they're not, but
mhm,
they can also use their own elements of motivation, of connecting with players
mhm,
to be themselves while still taking benefits or good things from Bill. And
mhm,
it seems like pretty much everything that both Wolf and Mayo are at least saying is trying to be the exact opposite of Bill. Wolf is doing some things following his dad's philosophies, which makes
mhm,
sense. But a lot of those philosophies are similar to the Patriots too, but saying the exact opposite
mhm,
and stuff. It might just be like you said, they're not thinking when they're talking, and the wording just makes it sound come off bad.
mhm,
Like when Wolf was saying that the how they changed up their scouting methods. It came off as him saying it's a better way of doing it. I think what he was trying to say is for how I run things and the scouts that we have
mhm,
in place, it's a way that utilizes their strengths the best, or that we can make it work the best for who we have.
mhm,
But the way it came off was, I know better than the greatest general manager of all time.
mhm. Yeah, it's just I just don't have there hasn't been much done this offseason that's given a lot of faith to everyone. And who knows, maybe we're wrong. The odds
It,
that
I think it depends. Like I said after the free agency on the free agency pod after free agency happened, if they plan on sitting Drake May all year, I actually really like the personnel decisions they made this offseason.
mhm,
I like what they're doing. It seems like they're trying to save for year two and then go all in.
mhm,
If they plan on starting Drake May day one, this whole offseason, both personnel wise and everything that has gone on behind the scenes and changing everything,
mhm.
has been a complete disaster.
Yep.
In my opinion. Maybe I'm
Mhm.
wrong, but I don't think I am.
Yep. Yeah, I always just tie it into just if you just watch and listen to what everyone has said, uh, you have to know. It just baffles me why moving on from Bill is one thing, but moving
Yep.
on from Bill to Jerod is just the thing that I just still doesn't make any sense. Where I would have been fine if they moved on to him for Vrabel or even one of
Yep.
those other guys. If you wanted to go completely different and you wanted to go like the was it Ben Johnson or
Yeah,
the
Ben
guy from
Johnson.
Ben Johnson from the Lions, and you want to go completely different, that's one thing. But then to go to Gerard, who you claim is because he learned under Bill and learned everything and went to business school, and worked in the business sector, even though he's basically just one of those guys that says like, "Oh, buy our product." I'm a former NFL player, um, and you're just throwing everything that you learned out from him. Where you have the guy that basically married everything the right way out there, right for you to pick, but the problem with him is
And
that
Vrabel.
in Vrabel, but the problem with him for you is that he has too much of a backbone and has too much of a voice, and that's not what you're looking for as a coach.
And he'd want too much control.
Yeah. And control isn't a bad thing all the time where you know what players work well for you. I think this is something that Mike Lombardi has said really well. And
Yep.
again, some people say that he's a little bit too much of a Bill ball washer, but he mentions it too with Vrabel. And it's not always a Vrabel ball washer. So the thing with Vrabel and with Bill and even Andy Reid is a good example. And who's the other coach? There's another one out there that I'm blanking on. Um, Whoever it was, there's another guy, another coach out there, other than those three. But
Was Pete Carroll to an extent.
Pete Carroll is that they don't want the control for just control's sake. They want input in knowing that the players that are getting on their team fit the right system and fit what they do and fit the culture that they're going to have. Because you learn just from last night, and you learn from even Mike Vrabel's ceremony, the culture was a huge, huge part into
Yep.
why this team succeeded. Not just Tom, but what Tom set from learning from the other players and from
Yeah.
Bill is how you do your job and what you put first. And not putting yourself first and putting the team first, all of that, you need to have the right players there. It was the reason why this team succeeded for 20 years was because it had the perfect players for the perfect system.
Yep.
You had the perfect coaches that were in there, the brightest minds that we'll never see ever again, all combined in the same spot. You have Charlie
Yep.
Weiss, you have Ernie Adams, you have Josh McDaniels, you have Bill O'Brien, you have Romeo Cornell, you
Rob
have
Ryan, the beginning of the
Rob Ryan, you have Bill Belichick, of course.
Ivan
Um,
Fears.
Ivan Fears, you have Dante Scarnecchia, you have all of these guys with an insane amount of football knowledge all coming together. It's never going to happen again.
And they also
Um,
had the perfect players to fit that system
yeah.
because on defense, pretty much defense, they had the players to set that culture. Ty Law,
Hmm.
Lawyer Malloy, Teddy Bruschi, Willie McGinnis, bringing in Mike Vrabel.
Hmm.
So Bill was able to keep the players that he knew could fit in his system of what he wanted and create that culture.
Hmm.
Whereas some players that he knew wouldn't fit in that culture, he got rid of,
Hmm.
even if it was controversial.
Yeah. Roman Pfeiffer, another big
I
name
loved
no one
Roman
talks
Pfeiffer.
about. I love with the
He
neck
wasn't
roll.
there Bill's first year, but Bill brought him in
Hmm.
for 2001.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's just one thing where you need to have some say, and you can't just sit back and say, "I'll do whatever the front office wants," which it
Yeah.
seems like is happening now. Um,
And then,
and
as Bill said on the radio show after his last game, where it was still uncertainty if he was
mhm.
gonna, or maybe it was the morning, the
Here's
next
the morning.
morning,
Is the next morning.
of he said someone has to still make that final decision.
Hmm.
So even if you do want there to be a general manager or whoever's making that final decision, you can be collaborative all you want.
Hmm.
Someone has to be the final say if push comes to shove.
Hmm.
And that's the thing that still worries me where Elliot Wolf is telling NFL Network that there will be a collaborative decision on when Drake May
Hmm.
starts. If there is a collaborative decision in 2001 of should Brady be starting quarterback or should Bledsoe get his job back? If that was a collaborative decision, Bledsoe would have gotten his job back, and the
Hmm.
Patriots dynasty probably would have never happened.
Yep. And then
Uh,
Tom Brady would have never been Tom Brady.
yep, exactly. because Bill saw what this team was doing under Brady. And then, as the Dynasty book says, Bill told Robert Kraft at the
Hmm.
end of training camp, if it was up to me 100%, Tom Brady would be starting opening day.
Hmm.
Again, that shows like Bill didn't have 100% uh, full say back then, just
Hmm.
because he knew what happened with him in Cleveland with Bernie Kosar. He knew this was essentially the same thing with Drew Bledsoe, so he couldn't,
Hmm.
after giving him that contract, just take the job away. But when push came to shove, it was Bill's decision in that season, and he
Hmm.
made that final decision.
Yeah.
Whereas who knows what? Again, this is all uncertainty. Maybe Jerod Mayo turns out to be an excellent head coach. Maybe Elliott Wolf is like his father and a great
Hmm.
general manager that we just don't know. But based on everything we've seen so far this offseason, there's just a lot of concern.
Hmm.
That's all.
All
But
right.
again, as I was telling you yesterday, Kevin, one of the things that might actually help Jerod, not to keep dragging this on, but might help Jerod is the NFL head coaches
Hmm.
are drastically getting worse and worse every year. Like when Bill took over in 2001, there were a lot of good head coaches. Even I don't know if Joe Gibbs was still coaching or when he came back, but there was Joe Gibbs, Andy Reid.
Hmm.
There were a lot of good coaches, and over the year, Bill Cowher,
Bill
John Gruden,
Cowher, John Gruden. You had
Bill Parcells,
the
before
guy
and
for the
after.
Falcons,
Oh yeah, Dan Reeves,
Dan Reeves. You had not Kyle Shanahan,
Mike
Mike
Shanahan.
Shanahan.
Whereas now the coaches are getting worse and worse. So back then, if you made a mistake, other coaches would capitalize on
Hmm.
it. If nowadays, this is part of the reason why, as like from 2011 through 2018, why the Patriots were so dominant, because they had both Brady and Belichick. Because if a team made a mistake, Brady would capitalize it as a quarterback
Hmm.
if a defense made a mistake. If another team makes a mistake on offense or defense or just in general,
Hmm.
Bill Belichick would capitalize on it. So that's part of the reason why they had so much success. Whereas nowadays, there aren't too many good head coaches. There's Andy Reid, but Mike Vrabel's out of the league. Pete Carroll's out of the league. John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, maybe you could say them. But other than that, all these coaches are getting worse and worse every
Hmm.
single year. All these flameouts. And if Jerod Mayo makes a mistake now, other teams might not capitalize on it.
Hmm.
So again, we don't know. I think there's definitely going to be growing pains. He still could be a great coach, but again, going from the greatest of all time, who's so prepared, to Jerod Mayo, who's never coached head NFL head coach game before, and then has only coached in the system for 5 years as an assistant coach with two coordinators who's never really called plays other than 1 year. Uh, Van Pelt did in
Hmm.
emergency relief after his offensive coordinator got fired. But besides the point, expect some growing pains. But with other terrible coaches, maybe they don't capitalize on it, and he looks better than he is.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what I hope. And then a lot of the times a quarterback can mask a coach.
Yep.
It didn't happen in with Los Angeles with the Chargers, where everyone knew Staley was the awful head coach. So
Yep.
he Herbert couldn't mask how bad Staley was, and but sometimes a quarterback can do that. So we'll see how much he can. Or
Hell,
is
Tom
he?
Brady with both Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles.
Yeah, and you could see what he did there. But again, I don't think Drake May is gonna be Tom Brady, but
Yeah.
we'll see what it is. All right, we talked a long time so far. One real quick thing. Trevor Lawrence contract. It just was
5 years,
announced.
275 million.
Hmm.
Average AAV of 55 million a year, which is the highest AAV, tied for the highest AAV in NFL history with Joe Burrow's contract. What are your thoughts on this? Or do you
I
want
don't
me to go
know.
first?
I'll go for. I don't know what the hell they're doing because
I
I get
do, but
I get them projecting and hoping that he's gonna be the guy for you, but he hasn't shown anything to say he's worth that much money. And I get you don't want to be in like quarterback purgatory where like, but they're basically gonna be
yeah,
because he hasn't shown anything to say that he's gonna take that next step and be a top 10 quarterback, a top five to seven quarter. If you're getting paid that much money, top five
yeah.
to seven quarterback in the league that can win you games on his own and make people better, and that you have the game plan specifically for. He hasn't shown that. If anything, he's shown he's a middle of the road kind of quarterback. He makes a lot of mistakes. He throws a lot of interceptions. He hasn't cleaned that up. And that's one of the big things that he needs to. If you actually even just look at his stats, I guess stats are for losers, and it's not something you can fully compare someone. But it's not very different from Mac Jones.
It's pretty
Like,
much if you were to throw them up, comparing them,
mhm,
other than just number of games, because Mac Jones was benched towards the end and had a couple
mhm.
injuries. If you were to just look at the stats, you wouldn't be able to tell who was who.
Yeah, you wouldn't go saying this guy needs to get 55 million a year, and this guy is going to be a
Yeah,
backup quarterback for you.
for him.
For him, yeah. And not to say that Mac Jones is worth 55 million, is not, but
This is honestly when I saw that I knew this was going to be happening because, as you said, you don't know what the hell they're doing. I do. It's just what the market goes for.
mhm,
I mean, the top. If you're he was the number one overall pick,
mhm,
so you're banking on that talent that you saw in college, that production in college, and just the overall talent. But B, you can't be without a quarterback. Um, look at all the teams around that don't succeed. Hell, even the Patriots the last few years
mhm,
without a real quarterback, you have no real chance of success. So if you think he's potentially the guy, you have
mhm,
to go for it. But also, I think part of the thing is they don't want to be in Miami situation right now where Miami didn't extend Tua. They didn't give him the contract after 3 years. And with the going rate of quarterbacks in the NFL, if Miami gave him that contract last year, he would have gotten 40 million a year AAV.
mhm,
Now Tua is going to be getting 55 to 60. So by getting it done early with the cap going up every single year, you're saving yourself money if you do hit. Now, if
mhm.
he sucks, you're like the Giants with Daniel Jones. So I think you'd rather be. eh, I think you'd still rather be Miami than the
I think you'd
Giants right
rather be in
now.
Miami and then you just
But
tag him.
I
Like,
think
you'd
they just
rather
have too.
spend the money knowing that you have the guy
Yeah,
rather than being stuck in like a Daniel Jones. Or this is kind of a blessing in disguise with Mac,
I was just gonna say
where
that. That was the
you
first thing I thought of when I saw the contract.
yeah, where you knew that because they didn't surround him with everything to make everything all hunky dory and perfect and everything like that, where he had receivers and offensive line, even though his offensive line, if healthy, was actually going to be probably pretty good, and they were at one point. Um, if you surrounded him with all this talent, and they actually, and again, all they needed was competent quarterback play last year, and they would have been a 10 or 11 win team if they had all that talent around him. You would have to pay him,
Yeah,
and you wouldn't know that he was going to crumble like a cookie when everyone around him had to start leaving because you're paying the quarterback that money and not them, and you'd be screwed. You'd be in basically purgatory where you're winning probably 8 games a year and you're not really doing anything. You have a guy that can be fine, but not anything that puts you over the top. And
yeah,
you
like
learned
Baker
last
Mayfield.
year he's no Baker's better than that. I would say it's like a
Baker
not
Mayfield.
no like I would always use Kirk Cousins as this example, but Kirk Cousins is a little bit better than that.
I'd use
But
Jared Goff, even though Goff had a good year last year.
yeah, it's just that vanilla quarterback that's just gonna do enough to keep you in it, but not do
Derek
enough.
Carr back with the Raiders.
Derek Carr is a great example. I think that's the best one where he'll do enough to keep you in it somewhat, but he's never gonna put you over the top. Where I think with Baker, you even see with Jared Goff a little bit, not much, but
This
with
past year, he
Baker,
had a better
Goff,
year, but
yeah,
or Geno Smith
Jimmy,
with the Seahawks.
yeah, Geno Smith is a good one, but like Baker, Jimmy, Cousins, and that kind of
Jimmy is not a
elk.
winner. Jimmy sucks.
No, Jimmy is a winner. Jimmy is he's just a little hurt.
All right. We don't have to
But
keep
yeah, not to
rehashing this
keep
every.
rehashing this argument, but you have those ones where they can kind of keep you in it. Maybe that's what Trevor Lawrence is going to be, but it's never going to win you a championship. Or if it does, it's going to be a one random fluke, and then like you're never going to win again.
Yeah,
Um, you'd be better off. You're better off completely blowing up and not having a guy whatsoever than
yeah,
having that kind of middler. And
yeah,
it's better off. And that's why we both said you got to draft May no matter what. Pretty much because if you get like the JJ McCarthy and he's just fine, uh, you're really screwed for the
yeah.
next not just 4 years, but you're screwed for the next 8 years
You're
because
gonna have to
then
re-sign him
you're gonna
just
have to
like what
re-sign
Jacksonville
him,
just did.
just how Jacksonville had to do. And they're going to be stuck with him where I don't think he's ever going to be that. There's still probably this year. I know Bill always says year 3 is when you can judge a quarterback.
Yeah.
I'll give him year 4 and see. But really, pretty much after this year, if he doesn't take that next step, he's never going to be what everyone wanted him to be.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be surprising because the odds of someone fulfilling that kind of destiny is very low.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that it wouldn't have hit. Is he worth the money? And it's going to be interesting to see what the Dolphins do. Are they going to?
They're gonna have to. Tua is gonna be getting a bigger contract just because Tua had a better year
He had a better
than Trevor
year.
Lawrence.
He looks better when you look at him. He doesn't
So he's
make the
probably gonna get
mistakes.
60 million a year, even with the injury concerns.
Yeah,
And
and
again, it like you said, I keep going back and forth. Yes, for the Patriots, it's a blessing in disguise that Mac Jones imploded last year and he had that situation because he's not the guy and you can get that guy now. But with him imploding, that also meant Bill Belichick's gone.
yeah,
And the Patriots with Bill Belichick is better than without him. So I don't know what they would have done
I
because
think the better
how
scenario would have been what Bill wanted to do in the first place was trade Mac after year 2,
yeah.
sign
But
Baker
what
Mayfield, and then draft Will Levis. I think that would have been the best scenario of everything. But
again, I think it goes to the point of let's say Mac had a fine year where he was average. He was like he was as a rookie, and the Patriots make the playoffs. But Bill knows who Mac Jones is because Bill knows everything, essentially. Bill wouldn't have wanted to give him the contract.
yeah, Bill
Robert
would have
Kraft would
given
have
him.
wanted to
Yeah,
give him the contract. If they make the playoffs, they're too high in draft order to trade into the top 12 to get one of those top 6 quarterbacks. What do they do? Because if it wasn't Mac imploding this year, it would be coming eventually.
hmm
And this is coming from someone who loved Mac Jones out of college, liked him in his first 2.5 years. But I think it would have been fascinating because Bill wouldn't have wanted to give him the contract. Kraft would have. And then they're not in a position to draft anyone realistically.
yeah. It's an interesting kind of scenario, and I think it really puts a lot of teams in a bind now, where I feel like before they weren't as kind of beholden to it, but now. And maybe they'll be fine because the cap keeps going up and up and up, and then you can basically kind of eat it however you
Yeah.
want. So, like, look at the Daniel Jones situation; it's not impossible to get it out from underneath.
Actually, yeah. I was gonna say maybe he would have gone after Russell Wilson, but again, I don't think Kraft would have wanted a quarterback that took him to the playoffs or is his
Fifth
fifth
son,
fifth son.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, for a quarterback of the future, I don't know what they would have done. So it's just something I've thought of, and I don't know. Again, state of the roster, they have a better chance of winning a Super Bowl with just because you have that potential in Drake May versus what you had with Mac Jones, but you don't have that coach that can take advantage of
hmm
everything.
yeah.
We don't think. We'll find out, but we don't think.
We'll see. I don't think we're gonna be wrong though, but we'll
Yeah.
see. And I'll be the first to admit that I'm wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong.
Yeah, I am too.
But we'll see. I don't know. One last thing because we've gone long anyway. Might as well just throw it out there. Because it's already been over an hour. So what is the next another couple minutes? There's a question I saw on Twitter from someone that I thought was a really good one. I wanted to ask on the pod and get your perspective. Was how many Super Bowls would have Peyton Manning won if he was with the Patriots rather than the Colts and he was here instead of Tom?
I saw that and I started thinking of that a couple of weeks ago. And you have to think of the rosters that you had in place. And I'm basing this off of who they were playing, where they were playing, and
hmm
all of that, taking those into account. In 2001, I don't think they win because I don't see him winning that snowball game
hmm
because he doesn't do well in bad weather. Granted, you could say if he played in bad weather, played with the Patriots all those years, maybe he would have been better.
And you
But I
could
have
also
to
say
go.
maybe they would have won more than 11 games and had home field advantage. Oh,
Yeah, but
oh, they had home field. Never mind. That doesn't
that
matter. It
was
was
a
in the
home
snow.
game.
Yeah, there's a home game.
So
That
I don't
was
think they win 2001, the Snow Bowl. And if somehow they did, I don't see him having that comeback against or that last drive against the Rams.
hmm
So I don't think they win in 2001. 2003, I don't think they win because I don't see him doing well in that Tennessee cold game. And I
Hmm.
don't see him doing well against the Colts in that bad weather, assuming the Colts have a quarterback comparable to Peyton Manning
Hmm.
caliber. Granted, the Patriots won 24-3, so they still probably would have beaten the Colts, but maybe Peyton Manning throws those 3, 4 interceptions there too.
Yeah.
So I don't think they win 2003. 2004, they probably do. You could argue Manning going into hostile Pittsburgh, maybe they don't win, but they won so convincingly that I think they
Hmm.
win 2004. 2005, they weren't good enough. 2006, I don't know if they beat the Chargers at home. The Chargers were the 1 seed. If
Hmm.
they do, they probably win in 2006. So they did. I say they win in 04, 50-50, they win in 06, or maybe less because they probably don't win on the road against the Chargers. But if they do, they beat the Colts. They beat the Bears. 2007, I hate to say it, but they probably win.
Hmm.
Because Brady plays that game 10 times, he wins 9.5. Manning does 10 times, he wins 9.5. So I say 07. 08, I'm assuming he goes down with injury, same with Tom. 09 weren't good enough. 2010, same thing with the Jets. I don't think they would have beaten them, even though they were the better team. 2011, the defense was so bad. I don't know if Manning would have been able to overthrow everything. So I say two, maybe three,
Yeah,
but probably two.
yeah, not going through all that detail. I would say 2 to 3. I don't think he wins really any. He won two normally. I would say I don't think it'd
And
be.
but the last one he won normally is just he was horrendous,
Yeah.
but he just had an insane historic
Mm.
defensive performance. And then the first one was pretty much he was going against a horrendous Bears team, and then the Patriots defense just crapped the bed the second half
Hmm.
because they were pumping in crowd noise, which
Yeah.
was part of it.
So
But
I would say 2 to 3. I'll go 3. He won two normally. Actually say 3 to 4, because I'm gonna put that on Bill to find a way to get out of him that he could. The one just thing with Peyton, it's just we don't know how he would have been if he played in cold weather the whole time and snow. And just his arm strength was never that great where he would be able to drive the ball through the weather. And who knows, maybe by having to play in bad weather, it would have gotten better. But that's just the tricky thing where I know both of us think the world of Bill, but I don't know how much he could have done with someone that can't throw in the weather. Like that's the
yeah,
hard part. Like that's what I'm debating. Like is how much could
that's why
Bill
I
do
went
with
through every
him?
scenario specifically to say why I got to it because I don't think they win those bad weather games because I
Yeah,
haven't seen it from him. Even though part of it might just be he didn't practice in it, not used to
yeah.
it.
So I'm gonna go with that. Bill would have somehow found a way to get him through it. And say 3 to 4. And again, Tom puts them over the edge more just because he's the better quarterback and has has it better. And lasted longer too. So that's the other thing. All right, that's it. So that's a really long pod. I don't know if we'll have another one until before training camp. There's not really much to go over. If there's anything that comes up, we'll definitely talk about it. But we'll probably have a podcast that comes up before training camp to kind of preview training camp, and then we'll go throughout probably weekly at that point or bi-weekly until preseason hits. And then when
Yep.
preseason goes, we'll do weekly, and then it'll
And we
be
have some
on the
ideas for
regular.
some guests to possibly come on, so we're trying to work through that. So just keep following us on Twitter. We'll keep posting on Twitter as we usually do, and then be on the lookout for some episodes we'll be posting when we're planning on doing them. So uh, again, nothing in the next couple weeks, but we will be once the training camp preseason gets underway. We'll be posting regularly each week. We won't be having another 2 month hiatus after 2 month
Yeah.
hiatus.
And then I'll be kind of boots on the ground for some of the training camp practices. Excited to kind of go back there and see practice firsthand and see how they look. I know I mentioned this before, I'm gonna give Joe Milton the kiss of death, like I gave to Taekwon Thornton, which I knew I was doing, where our dad before said about about Bethel Johnson when I was at training camp when I was younger. It's like, oh, look at this guy. He's really fast. You want to watch out for him. I said it to my daughter about Taekwon Thornton when watching him in preseason, knowing that I was going to just jinx him. And I'm going to do the same thing with Joe Milton. I'm going to say, look how far he can throw. My dad did the same thing with Rohan Davey, saying the guy's got a cannon. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with Joe Milton. He's going to turn out to probably be be a USFL quarterback in 2 years. So we'll see. Excited to kind of see some of these players firsthand. I'm really excited to see Baker, to see what it looks like, and then to see Douglas really in person, because I haven't really got to see him other than up top in the 300. So it'll be nice to see a little bit closer. All right, so make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Pat's 300 Level Pod. Again, like Eric said, up-to-minute updates. I think we're going to try and start. We haven't really done really well with the blog, but we're going to try and kick it up again this training camp and keep at it and do preseason breakdowns for the games, and then each week have one or two, so like a recap or a preview, that sort of thing. So need to get more out of that, so you guys get something you could read while you're on the crapper. So talk to you guys next time, and thank you for listening.